Thank you,
Yeah.
Wayne, for sharing your knowledge and your beauty of milkweed and butterflies and flowers. I know that he is an avid gardener and photographer, and with that, he has learned so much about butterflies and especially monarchs. And we have been interested as librarians here. We started this last year in the fall. We did a little program, and it was so popular that we as librarians wanted to bring it back as well because we loved it so much. And we would like to learn more from those around us. So Wayne, thank you for coming to the presentation.
You're welcome. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I want to thank Jennifer and Diana for hosting the event here at Basehor Community Library. I am Wayne Rhodus. I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about monarchs and milkweed, especially interested in talking to you all because you're the ones that really love monarch butterflies and lots of butterflies, I bet. I'm just like a lot of you all. Don't have any scientific degree or anything in entomology or with native grasses or anything like that. But just through photography, I became aware of the plight of the monarch butterflies about 10 years ago. And because I have a little bit of room here in the Basehor area in my yard that was just in fescue grass, I decided there was something I could do about it. And that's kind of how I got started down the road of using native plants to attract monarchs and insects of other types, and also lots of birds as well. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about monarchs, milkweed, and magic. And I want to thank the people that are zoomed into the meeting tonight. I also want to let you know that the library is recording this, and it would be available on their YouTube channel probably later this week. So we'll get started. So there's a beautiful monarch on aster, which is something you might see right about this time of year because aster's in bloom and it's a very important plant for the migrating monarchs. It provides a lot of nectar for the monarchs, and right now that's what they need to fuel their flight from wherever they have been in the north, even as far as Canada, and making their way magically all the way to Mexico, where they will roost over the winter and be ready to head back north in early March next year. So tonight we're going to talk about some monarch facts, just a few little things about them that you might find interesting. We're going to talk about the monarch's miracle. They're kind of a unique species in the insect world because they have multi-generations that comprise the year-long journey that they make. We're going to talk a little bit about what monarchs need to survive. And the caterpillars need something a little bit different than the butterflies need. And we'll talk about threats the monarchs face. I'll show you a little bit about what I've done to help them here in the Basehor area, and talk about some things that you all might be able to do if you're interested to help them in your own yards. So some monarch facts. There's 4 stages that a monarch goes through during its life cycle. Does anybody know what the first one would be? Yes. Yes. The egg is the very first thing that the monarchs do. That's the start of the cycle. So a female monarch will lay an egg on a milkweed plant, and that's when the process starts. Did you have a question or comment?
It turns into a caterpillar?
Yes, that's the very next phase. It turns into a caterpillar after it hatches, and it's also called larva. That's the caterpillar that we kind of are familiar with, isn't it? Black and yellow and white caterpillar that we see. And then the third phase is the really kind of mysterious one. It's when the caterpillar's all done growing and decides to crawl off and change into a butterfly. It's like a miracle. And that's called a pupa. And the chrysalis, that's a fancy word, that's a Greek word, is the little shell or cocoon that it puts itself in while it's making its big change. And finally, after about a week or 10 days, the chrysalis lets the adult butterfly out. And that's be like the butterfly you see here. So monarchs are kind of different than some butterflies because there are 4 or 5 generations. So that whole process of the egg, the caterpillar, the pupa, and the adult butterfly happens several times in a year. And each time it happens, the next generation goes off and lays eggs and starts the whole process over again. Monarch caterpillars need to have milkweed to eat. It's the only food they like to eat. So what happens if they don't have milkweed? They starve. They can't survive. So we have to have milkweed available for them to eat. And there's lots of different kinds of milkweed, but there's certain kinds that they seem to like better than others. And a monarch, you see how it's orange and black? Well, those colors warn predators in the world of nature that the butterfly is a little bit dangerous, that it's kind of make them sick if they eat them. So that warns the birds and other things that might eat them. Don't eat me, I'm not good to eat. And then a female monarch, she's going to lay about 100 to 300 eggs. Can you imagine 300 babies? That's an awful lot. But in her little short lifetime, she'll lay about 100 to 300 eggs. And she needs a lot of milkweed to do that. And finally, only about 1 out of 10 butterflies or caterpillars will survive if they're in the wild. There's so many things that want to eat them, so many dangers for them out there that not very many of them make it. And in my experience, I think it's even less than that, like only 5 out of 100 maybe. So that's why I started getting eggs that are laid in my milkweed in my yard and bring it inside so that I could raise them in safety and then let them go when they grow up. So here's the life cycle. The monarch butterfly, the eggs usually take about 3 to 5 days to hatch. And then once they do, the caterpillar then lives for about 2 or 3 weeks, eating the milkweed and growing faster and faster until it gets into its chrysalis and stays there for a week or 2 to become the butterfly. And that happens over and over again. So what do monarchs need for their eggs? Yes, they need milkweed. That's the only plant that the monarchs will lay their eggs on. So if the female can't find milkweed, she just flies and flies looking harder and harder until she finds some milkweed. So a female, since she lays 100 to 300 eggs, she needs a lot of milkweed plants to be able to lay all of her eggs. And you have any idea or reason why they might only lay 1 egg on each plant? Yes. Right. The caterpillars are going to eat a lot of milkweed leaves. So it's best if they have 1 plant all to themselves to eat. So that's why the monarchs typically will only lay 1 egg on a plant. Now, a second female might come and lay an egg on that same plant, but usually they don't. Now, if there's not very much milkweed available, I've seen where they'll lay 4 or 5, even 6 eggs on a single plant simply because there's not enough milkweed for them to find a plant for each one of them. So I'm going to show you the miracle of a monarch caterpillar being born. So a friend of mine on Facebook, Gigi Brilliantes, did an amazing job taking really, really close-up pictures of a monarch egg. And anybody know how big the egg is? Did you see one over there? It's tiny. It's even smaller than a pencil lead. So it was amazing that she could take pictures that are this good, this close of the monarch's egg. But she did even better than that. She was ready and set up with her camera, and she took pictures of the caterpillar coming out of the egg. So here's the first shot where the caterpillar is starting to chew a hole in the egg. And remember how tiny that is. And then it keeps eating and making the hole larger and larger to where the caterpillar has enough room to get out of the egg. Finally, here it comes. Isn't that amazing? Does it look like a monarch caterpillar? Not yet, really. That's getting even further and further out, and you can start to see some of its legs. And now it's coming out of the shell. It's almost all the way out. And you can see it walking on what looks like its tippy toes. But really, those are called its true legs. And there's 6 of them. And it has a lot more legs at the back, but they're a little bit different. You can see one kind of hanging there, and it doesn't really have a little toenail on it, does it? Well, there are little suction cups on there, and those are called their pro legs. And there are 10 of them. So they have 16 legs altogether. So you can see now that little larva, that teeny tiny caterpillar is turned around. And what it's going to do now is going to eat that entire eggshell. And it does that because there's lots of proteins and nutrients in the shell that helps it to start growing its body. So that was pretty amazing. I thought that she had these pictures that she took of that whole process, because if we were watching it over there on the table, if one was coming out, we wouldn't really be able to see it with our eyes. So here's a monarch caterpillar that's already shed its skin once and is on a leaf, and I put a penny next to it to just show you how small it still is, even though it's already grown big enough to shed its skin once. And do you know how many times that a monarch will shed its skin? 4 times overall it will shed its skin. And that's because it eats so much and so fast it grows, its skin can't stretch far enough. So it just kind of wriggles out of it and gets new skin and starts growing all over again. So here's another monarch caterpillar, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And the only thing they think about doing is eating milkweed. And here's another one eating the milkweed, and you can see it's holding on the underneath side of the leg of the leaf with its little pro legs and its true legs. It's pretty amazing that they can hold on while they eat. And they like to eat the edges of the milkweed, going back and forth, and just kind of eating a big hole in the end of it. And here's a caterpillar that's almost completely full grown. You can see again how it's kind of eating the whole edge of the leaf, kind of back and forth. And can you tell from this picture which end is the head, which is the tail? Yeah. Yeah, the one up at the top on the right is where its head is. And you can almost kind of see a little bit that it almost looks a little bit like a walrus's head from the top, kind of round and bulbous. And that's the head of the monarch caterpillar. But you can always tell if they're big enough because they'll have the little pointy legs. The little true legs are always by its head. And once the caterpillar has eaten enough milkweed and it's gotten so big, then it crawls off to a nearby plant. It'll look out and try to find a really good place where it can hang itself and begin to form its chrysalis. And on our table over there tonight, you may have seen, I have some empty chrysalis where they've already come out. And it shows the silk that they spin, kind of like a spider web that they put back on the underneath side of the leg or the leaf. They just go back and forth, and get that web attached to the bottom of the leaf. And then they spin a little silk dot right in the center, and they hook themselves to that little dot and hang like this. And the caterpillar is going to hang like that for maybe a whole day, 24 hours or maybe even a little longer sometimes, until it's ready. And I don't know how they hold themselves up like that long. That'd be too hard for me. But once they've done that, then it's when the real miracle of the monarch happens. And the same thing happens with some other butterflies, but we kind of like the monarch a lot because it's so pretty. So now we're going to watch that monarch form its chrysalis. So it's actually already started. And what it's doing is it's actually shedding its skin by kind of contracting its tummy and pushing and contracting. And it just keeps pushing really hard to get that old skin off. This is the 5th time It has got rid of its skin, but this time it's making that chrysalis. And just keeps wriggling and wriggling. And what it's trying to do is actually still being held on. This is in my butterfly enclosure, but it's holding on still with the skin. So the skin's the only thing that's holding it. The caterpillar's really not hooked onto anything yet. And once it wriggles that skin all the way up, then it will hook itself into the little silk dot with a thing that becomes called a cremaster. And once it's securely hooked, it'll wriggle and it will let go of that skin. And you'll see here in just a second, it's going to shed that skin, it's going to fall off. Now, these are a little bit shorter films. This whole process would probably take, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes for it to kind of fully form its chrysalis. But you can even see the antennas and stuff there as it's wriggling, and pretty soon it's going to really start jiggling. Just like a hula hoop. And it's just amazing how they know to do this stuff. Yeah, the first part of it, and then the outer shell takes a little bit longer to go, but you can see now it's getting hooked in really good, and now saying, okay, I'm ready to get rid of that old skin. Have any of you ever had a butterfly thing like this at your school where you got to watch this? You have? Yeah.
It happened only in
On Latha? Yeah. So now its skin's all, let go of its skin, and it's going to wriggle like that. And I'm going to stop the video because it'll go a long time.
Is this one that you took?
Yeah, this is a video I took in my enclosure here in Basel. So on mine, I only collect eggs that are laid in my milkweed in my yard. There are places that actually kind of like farms that they will make them, and you can order them, and you can order the eggs or small caterpillars and get them. But I only use the wild laid eggs because I kind of think that the process of bringing them into my house just a few feet away from where they were laid and then raising them in the safety and releasing them back out, I haven't really affected the butterflies or in their next journey or their next phase. But if you order them, they come from different parts of the country. You're not really sure whether that makes any difference to them or not. There have been scientific studies that say that it's a problem, but there's also been, like in a lot of scientific studies that say, no, they can find their way after they have a few hours out in the wild. They can kind of get reoriented and know, I need to fly north or I need to fly south. So there's a little bit of conflicting information out there. But here's a close-up of what you see that Jennifer's got over here on the table. And you can see some of that what she passed around too. You can see the chrysalis, and you can see that it's a word from the country in Greek called, the word chrysalis means gold in their language. And it's for the little 3 gold dots that are on the outside of the chrysalis. That's how it got its name. And at the top, where it hooks onto the leaf, you see that little silk button, that little spider web that it wove. And then the hook that the butterfly put into it, the cremaster, is what holds it securely in place. So Jennifer's passing around one that's showing some of the chrysalis and one that's in the jejay. Right now, I know that not everybody can see that at home, but we've got a whole series of monarch caterpillars here in chrysalis from the very early stage, some just coming out of eggs all the way up to ones that are almost ready to emerge from their chrysalis. Now, it's pretty easy to see them when they're in a butterfly enclosure, like at my place, but in the wild, when they're out where all the plants are, where the butterflies normally live, they're very hard to see because they're not very big and they're in all that green vegetation and stuff, and they're really well hidden. And the chrysalis, the shell, is very strong. It can withstand all kinds of weather and wind and protects the pupa while it's turning itself into the butterfly. And here, right before it gets ready to be born, the whole chrysalis turns crystal clear, and you can see the monarch inside, can't you? When it gets like this, it's almost time. So don't go away. It's going to be born. So here's a little video showing what happens when the butterfly emerges from that crystal clear chrysalis. So they're hanging upside down, and a butterfly is just coming out, and it's very fragile. So it needs to make sure it can hold on and not fall down on the ground. So the first thing it wants to do is get a good grab on something nearby. Now, did you see this at your school too?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
They didn't stay in my classroom all day and night. They might have done it at night.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they like to, if they can, they like to come out right in the very late part of the night, right before morning, so that they have time to hang there and their wings will dry. As you'll see here in just a minute, when they come out of the chrysalis, their wings are all wrinkly and all folded up, and they wouldn't be able to fly anywhere. See its legs kind of pressing out, kind of opening that chrysalis up, and it's kind of squeezing itself out, and pretty soon it's going to slip out of there, but it has to hold on. And here it comes. And now you can see the legs, and you can see its proboscis and its antenna, and you can, a little bit there, you can see the wings. It's a little bit dark video, but you can see the wings are all kind of folded up. That's because it's been tucked inside that little bitty shell for a long time. Now, what do you think it has to do to make its wings grow? Yeah, it has to pump a bunch of fluid out of its tummy right into those wings. It actually pumps fluid into those wings and makes them kind of blow up like a balloon. And once that does that, then the wings have to dry for about 4 or 5 hours before the butterfly is ready to fly. And Lainey's here tonight. She's my little helper. She releases the butterflies a lot. And earlier this summer, she was wanting to name them all, but we ran out of names because this year I'm going to release 98 monarch butterflies back into the wild that were all laid in my yard. So I'm pretty happy about that. I wanted to get to 100, but we didn't quite make it. So I have 5 more to go, and that will make 98 for this year. Now, do you guys know how you can tell the boy monarch from the girl monarch? You know what little mark you can look for to tell the difference? Well, on the monarch butterfly, there's a little spot right here on this little line. And on that, when the wings are closed, it's just a little smudge. But that little smudge is a dot on the other side of the wing. That's the boy. The girl butterfly doesn't have that. So you can see them when they open their wings. You can see if they have the dot, then there's a boy. If they don't have the dot, it's the girl. And that's how you can tell them apart. Now, when they're in their little chrysalis, if you can look down from the very top, there is a way to tell what they're going to be even before they're born. There's a little mark, a little dash in there that's kind of hidden that you can tell what it's going to become. So here's a big old monarch caterpillar. He's about ready to get ready to go crawl in his chrysalis. We're just gonna kind of go back over a little bit of what we've talked about. So monarch caterpillars, they need lots of milkweed to eat. And it's its host food. And what's a host? Well, a host plant is kind of like a caterpillar's home. That's where it's going to live the whole time. But unlike us, it eats its house. We don't eat the house. We get to go out to get pizza or mom or dad cooks dinner for us, but the caterpillar is going to actually eat the house that it's living in. Monarch caterpillars shed their skins 4 times because they eat so fast. And they actually grow out of their skin. So they have to get rid of that skin and then have a bigger skin underneath where they can continue to grow. And scientists call each one of those times that does that an instar. Kind of a fancy word for shedding its skin. And this is one that just makes me crazy. By the time the caterpillar, when it was born, like we saw coming out of the egg, until it's fully grown, it weighs 3,000 times more than when it was born. That means if we were 6 pounds old or 6 pounds when we were born, we'd weigh 18,000 pounds. Oh man, that'd be an awful lot, wouldn't it? So now we're going to talk a little bit about what monarch butterflies need to survive. So the butterflies need something a little bit different than the caterpillars do. So what do the butterflies need? Well, they need lots of native wildflowers for nectar. And hopefully those wildflowers will be free of pesticides or insecticides that are sprayed to kill insects. Because if those flowers have that pesticide on them, it will actually kill the butterflies. So we need lots of pesticide-free wildflowers for them, just for their food. Here's a monarch actually getting a little bit of nectar from those aster, the little purple flowers that you might see around. If you look close right now, they're all blooming around this area. You can see it just holding on and just getting nectar out of that flower. Now the monarchs live in a really dangerous world when they're in the wild. Anybody know what things might be dangerous to them? What? Birds, yeah, they'll eat the caterpillars and stuff. Anything else you can think of? When they're a caterpillar, well, there's some things that can threaten their survival. Little predators like this crab spider will hang around and kind of camouflage themselves, and they'll eat a monarch caterpillar or even the butterflies if they can get hold of them. So they kind of hide and kind of ambush the butterflies because they can't really see them that well. And even something that's as cute as a ladybug will sometimes accidentally eat a monarch's egg when it's on the milkweed leaf. Now this predator likes to eat little aphids. They're little things yellow things that get all over the milkweed and other plants. So it's kind of a good thing to have around, having the ladybugs. But sometimes they accidentally can kill the monarch's egg. And this guy here, he looks pretty dangerous, and he is for a butterfly. That's a praying mantis, and they'll just stand like that for a long, long time. I've had 2 that were on my milkweed this year that didn't move for probably 2 weeks. They just stayed in the same place, and they wait for a butterfly or a bee to come, and then they get them. But all of those things aren't the biggest threat. The biggest threat is that we have gotten used to spraying our yards with insecticides and herbicides to kill off certain kinds of plants and insects. And it's those sprays that really are the biggest threat to insects and monarchs that we do. If we can, this is the biggest change we need to make to really help monarchs, is to try to eliminate or at least reduce where we're spraying so that they don't get killed by the chemicals that we're putting in our yards and our trees. So we want less of just a big yard with nothing but grass that doesn't have any kind of flowers or any insects or anything in it, because we spray it with insecticides. And we want more of what you see on the bottom picture, which is pesticide-free pollinator habitat with all kinds of wildflowers. And we can do this. It's not that hard. Native plants grown here for thousands of years. They're really good at living here if we give them a chance. So now that we've kind of gone through that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've done. And like I said, I'm your neighbor. I live right here in the Batesville area, and I live on about 1 acre. And I learned about the plight of the monarchs about 10 years ago and decided there was something, you know, I could do for it. Instead of just having in my big yard, maybe I could make a garden for them. So I got hold of a friend of mine who's an expert about plants, and he came out the yard and we came up with a plan for a garden. So I created a very large native plant garden in my yard where I'd only had grass before. And the garden you see here in this picture is as big as my house. My wife thought I was crazy, digging up her yard and putting in a house-sized garden. A few years after that, I had a garden that was a wonderful oasis for all kinds of plants, for insects and wildlife to come. So it's not only the insects, but like you said, birds use it, snakes, turtles. I get lots of bunny rabbits in my yard. There's all kinds of things will come to your garden. So here is my yard in summer 2013. Not much there, is there? It's just a big old field of fescue grass that I had to mow all the time. And nothing else lived there. You didn't see birds or butterflies or anything. So then decided, once I learned about the monarchs being in trouble, I decided we're going to do something to make a garden. So I had my neighbor till up this great big 2,400 square feet of my lawn, and I got it ready to plant flowers. So I got my garden crew together to come over and help me because it was such a big job. And I bought 140 plants from a nursery in Baldwin City. And then we came out, and about every 4 feet, we put one of those plants. And this is my little butterfly helpers, brothers, Caden and Drew, and their dad. And we got to work and got those plants in the ground. And about a week later, I had 140 live plugs in the ground, and I would water them. And this was in September, this time of year when we put the garden in. And then in the wintertime, about in January, I got a whole bunch of seed, and I just spread it all over the garden to fill in the spots in between. And you need to put out the seed in the wintertime because it needs to freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw, freeze and thaw to help the seed know I need to start to be a plant when it warms up in the spring. So that's the time that we have to put seeds out. And the very next year, this is what my garden already looked like the very first year. All these plants were happy to be back where they used to always live, but hadn't been around for years and years. And you can see rose verbena in there, there's milkweed, there's coneflowers in there, there's all kinds of different plants. In all, I had about 30 different species of wildflowers in my garden. And you see they kind of grow separate like that. So you want to keep putting more seed down to help them expand and fill in those areas. And this is that same garden 3 years later, and about this time of year, about in September. And there's a whole bunch of aster there and sunflowers. And those sunflowers had grown about 10 feet tall. Those are called Maximilian sunflowers. So it's important, if we want to have butterflies and insects, we have to have the native plants. You know, they need to not be treated with chemicals. So what's really important about native plants? Well, they have hugely deep roots. Our grass that we put in our yard, the root system is only 2 or 3 inches deep. That's all the deeper the fescue grass and bluegrass, their roots go. That's why we have to water them all the time. That's why we have to give them chemicals, because there's not much nutrition at the top part of the ground. And so we're spending a lot of money giving them fertilizer and watering, and then we have to mow, and just we're creating more work and expense for ourselves than we need to. But native plants, they can send roots down 10, 12, 15 feet into the ground, certain types of plants. And when they do that, they break the soil up and it makes it so it can hold water better. And it actually does like the rainforest. They remove carbon, that bad stuff that's in the air, and put it in the ground. The plants do that too. They need very little water once they're established because they've got such deep roots and they can reach water that's way down in the ground that a regular grass can't. And the plants provide nectar for the caterpillars and the bees and other pollinators. And they also provide critical food for the birds to eat and feed their babies. So birds are predators of caterpillars. And if we don't have caterpillars, then the birds don't have anything to eat. So like a pair of bluebirds, when they're raising their babies, they feed their babies about 300 to 500 caterpillars and spiders and insects every single day for like 3 weeks. So they need a lot of caterpillars to feed their babies. They don't eat seeds at that time. So they really need the insects to feed their babies. So if we've got a yard that doesn't have any caterpillars, then we're not going to have butterflies or birds that prey on them. So kind of showing you a little bit about what I've done in my yard, and I've created large gardens, but you can help by creating small garden spaces if that's what your yard can accommodate. So you can create gardens. And the first thing is wanting to help the insects, the monarchs. So maybe you could put a garden with native plants in between your sidewalk and your house, an area right up there that's next to the foundation. And that way you can get deep roots going down and help stabilize the soil right by your house. And have a lot of color and activity there. You can have blooms all year long if you select the right plants. Or maybe back in a corner of your yard, if you've got a fenced in area, you can put some plants back there, and you just need to match the conditions of light and whether the soil is wet or dry all the time with the kind of plants you select. And if you select the right plants for the area, they'll grow fantastic. And maybe you don't have much of a yard at all. You can do container plantings. With native wildflowers, because they have big, deep roots, you might want to select plants that are annuals that you have to plant every year so that the roots don't have to get quite so big. But you can grow a few containers with native plants that will attract butterflies to come maybe right up onto your own deck. And of course, if you want monarchs, we have to have milkweeds. And if you do that, you'll attract the beautiful monarch. You can see here a bumblebee flying in, and even there's a little native ladybug hidden in the blooms right there. So that's the key. So that really wraps up the presentation tonight. Well, thank you all for coming out and visiting with us tonight and learning a little bit about the monarchs. If you or your parents are on Facebook, you can friend me there and follow the photos and information I share. But you've also got some resources here. The first three are things you can learn about monarchs and things that are going on around the US. And if you're interested in doing some plantings, now is the time to put native plants in the ground. There'll be a lot of native plant sales going on. You can find that pretty easy just by Googling native plant sales in the Kansas City area. But there's also a really good resource just right here, just down the road from us. Happy Apple Farm is at 178th in Evans Road, and they sell tons of different native plants. And she's also an expert helping you learn about the plants and stuff like that. So you can check that out. And then a really good resource if you're thinking about putting in native plants is Kansas Wildflower and Grasses. That's an online source that you can go and you can look at it, and it tells you about the individual plants that you can sort by color, by time of year they bloom. And then once you pick something you like, you click on it and it shows you all the information. It tells you what kind of soil they like, what kind of moisture that they like, how tall they get, and gives you some interesting facts about the plant itself. So it's a really good resource as you're looking to decide, what plants do I want to use? So that's right there, right here local, that you can get some great information from. So is there any questions tonight before we wrap up? If not, I think we're going to have a raffle for the picture. I want to thank everybody that came out tonight and those of you that have joined us online.